Welcome to Brew Builds, your place for DIY home improvements. I'm Paul. This is part 3 in the series of our backyard makeover. I'll be building the concrete forms for the fireplace slab and footings for the pergola, renting a cement mixer, then pouring a slab for the first time. You ready? This is a lot to do for one person, so I better get moving. Today, I get to use power tools. I actually purchased this plate compactor. I was going back and forth between renting one and purchasing one, and decided I just wanted to have one here when I needed it. I didn't know how long it was going to take to actually compact this broken concrete up, so I thought it'd be better to have one here. And who doesn't like new power tools anyways? I've never actually used a plate compactor, so it'll be fun to see how it goes today. But before I can use it, I need to break up some of this concrete a bit smaller, so I'll be using this again to break up more of the concrete, and then we'll take this new plate compactor over and see how it compacts it. So it's going to be a fun day of using power tools. Yeah. Tools and items needed: a plate compactor, a pneumatic hammer, a circular saw, some 2x4s, 2x6s, and 2x12s, cement mix, gravel, sand, concrete anchor bolts, a cement mixer, buckets, wooden stakes, a string level, a hammer, screw gun driver, a shovel, a concrete float, wood screws and nails, and your personal safety gear. After spreading out the broken concrete, I still had to break some of the larger pieces. I used a pneumatic air impact hammer to make the pieces smaller, then used a hoe and a rake to spread and even out the gravel. So now I get to reuse this stuff, which I separated out when I was digging up the dirt. This will help fill in the gaps in between the bigger pieces of concrete. On the brew scale, technical ability I rate as an expert. You need to make sure all your measurements and prep work are correct before pouring concrete. Physical ability I rate as hard. Each load of concrete that needed to be mixed was close to 350 pounds. Concrete should be poured on compacted gravel or soil, so I need to do some compacting to prepare this area before putting down the concrete forms. Alright, time to compact some gravel. Since this is brand new, I had to put the oil in it, which is over here. I did put some gas in it, so it should start. Right here in the front is an on-off switch. We'll put it in the on position. And then on this side there is a fuel valve, so we'll put the fuel valve on. And then there's a choke. Put the choke on full. This is actually the throttle, so I'll make sure it's in the idle position. And I have my ear protection because it may get loud. So let's get this motor started and compact some gravel. So what I'm trying to do now is break up the remaining of this concrete. I got one more pile of this bigger stuff. So once I get that broken, I can spread this out and try to get it even throughout this area. I ran the string line so I know what level is to the house, and I can also use that as a guide for when I start building the forms for the footings and for the slab. Alright, so let's get to this. To make sure the slab and footings for the pillars are in the correct spot, I need to mark a center point for the slab and the footings at 13 feet 2 inches from the back wall of the house. To do this, I'll lay a stake with a center mark on the ground that is the correct distance from the house, then measure from each corner of the sliding glass windows, moving the center line of the stake until the two measurements from the windows match. Then I'll pound the stake into the ground. I have a stake marking what should be the center, so I'm just going to double check these measurements. So from this side of the corner of the window, we're at 195 1/4, right there to the edge of the stake. Then from this side of the sliding glass window, we're at 195 1/4. Cool. So this will be the center point of the slab and also a spot to measure from to dig the footings. Time to start digging. footings for the pillars need to be 16 inches square. The two outside footings will be built in two parts. I'll use a 2x12 to make the upper part for the above ground pillar and 1x4 to help make the lower section, which is the actual 16-inch square footing. The two middle footings will not need a form as they'll be poured as part of the slab for the fireplace. I have a string level that represents the height of the pavers, and I want the fireplace slab to be 1 inch above that, which should be about the same height as the slab of the house. So I'll make these boards for the forms 5.5 inches tall. I needed some boards to make the slab forms out of, so I decided to use these from the old patio cover.
I'm not sure if you could tell, but these boards are fairly warped, so I'm going to have to cut one side using a guide to get it square again and flat.
I'm going to cut some off the end first to make it square and to get away from the end cracks in the wood. You know, it's kind of hard to mark a line while holding a camera. To square up the edge, I need to put a saw guide 1.5 inches away from the edge of the board at each end. Then I can run a saw down this guide and it will give me a nice new straight square edge to work from. Then I can reposition the saw guide to give me a cut that will make the boards the 5.5 inches I'm needing. I'll cut these at 10 feet for the long side and use 2x4s cut at 5 feet for the short side of the slab. For the two footings and pillars, I'll use 2x12s for the upper section, cutting 2 pieces at 12 inches and 2 pieces at 18 inches. That way I have some extra length for mounting and attaching the upper and lower section of the forms together. Use 16-penny nails or screws to hold the forms together. I used a 12-inch wide piece of wood as a guide while nailing. For the lower section of the footing, I'll add some 1x4s to the hole that I already dug for the footing. This will make the lower section 16 inches square. I'll cut 2 boards at 16 inches and 2 at 17.5 inches. This will give me a square box with an inside dimension of 16 inches. I'm using 1 5/8 inch screws to hold this box together. Once it is screwed together, use a carpenter square to check that each corner is at 90 degrees. Okay, let's put this on top of the hole that I dug for the footing. Now comes the fun part of making sure that this form is in the correct spot. Once the footing is poured, it is not moving. I'm wanting the paving stones to run right up to the upper part of the footing. That means the lower 16-inch part of the footing needs to be 4.25 inches below my string level, which would give me the space for 1 inch of sand, 2.25 inches for the paver, and a 1-inch slope from the house for drainage. Alright, once I have that set, then I'll make sure that the form is level, then I'll use some stakes to hold the form in place. Some help showed up to move bags of concrete mix and gravel, so while my son is doing that, I'll keep building and working on the area for the forms. I spent a lot of time measuring and remeasuring distances and checking to make sure that everything was at the proper spot. After measuring a few times, I realized that this is in the wrong spot and I dug the hole 4 inches off. This is why measuring multiple times is so important on a project like this. Sometimes it's good to step away and then come back and measure again. I'm sure glad I caught this one. I actually started the hole in the correct spot and then ended up moving it 4 inches. Anyhow, now it has this form in the proper spot that it needs to be. I cut some stakes out of some 1x3s. I'll be attaching the lower forms to these, making sure they are level and in the correct spot. Before attaching the upper section, I will add some center lines to the top of the forms. These will help me square up the two footings to each other and give me the center point for the concrete anchors. The camera probably can't pick it up, but to line up for to check that it's square and true, I line up these marks, put the marks down there, and I just kind of stand back there and eye it a little bit and just tweak it until it looks square.
Once they are square to each other and the house, pre-drill holes for some construction screws. Using screws will help keep the forms in the exact place compared to hitting it with a hammer, and pre-drilling holes will just keep the wood from splitting. Now it's time to check the level of the forms for the slab. You'll want to check both sides at each corner for level. Once they are level, attach the stakes to the side of the forms. Now I did measure from the house to this corner and that corner in the middle to make sure it's the right distance from the house. And then I did measure the angles to make sure that this is square. And we're good. I'll just double check it. 140 and a half. And 140 and 3/8. I'm gonna add a shim to this corner. So the inspector should be here soon. I'm hoping he will sign off on my footings and on the slab here, then I can get this poured tomorrow. Before I pour the cement, I want to put some centerline marks for the slab and footings. That way I will know where to put the post anchors. I'll mark the sides of the boards as well in case things get covered up with concrete, which I'm sure they will. This is actually my first slab I've ever poured, and for some reason I thought you needed sand under concrete, but I've learned just a compacted gravel base is better. I don't think it will cause any problems, but I should have done a better job compacting it. What is the verse about a house built on sand? So my wife picked up this mixer for me, so today we'll be pouring the slab and these footings. Can't wait. I've been looking forward to doing this for a while. I haven't actually mixed the concrete using the individual pieces before. I've always gotten the premix. So I have the 94-pound bags of concrete, but I'm going to have half those to 47 pounds, and then I'll need 150 pounds of gravel, which is 2 1/4 of these buckets, 100 pounds of sand, which is 2 of those blue buckets, and then 24 pounds of water, which is 3 gallons. So I'll get this all mixed up in here and we'll start pouring. Let's lay down some concrete. While the concrete is mixing, I'll add in a 3/8 inch rebar for the slab and the footings. I'll set them on top of some 1-inch concrete pieces to keep them up off the sand so the rebar is embedded into the concrete. Alright, let's pour out our first batch of concrete. So I learned out the first batch, make sure you put the gravel in first, then some water, and then add the sand, put the concrete in last. It takes about 10 minutes to mix a batch of concrete. This was a challenge to do by myself, but hey, this is DIY. Since I'm new to mixing concrete this way, I would shovel half of the concrete bag into this blue bucket. Then I would use a bathroom scale to weigh the concrete bag to check that I divided it in half. I imagine the concrete pros are laughing right now. Now when it comes to the mixing concrete ratio of 3:1, gravel, sand, and concrete, I sure hope it's based on weight and not volume. Leave me a comment below to correct me if I'm wrong on this.
So it's going okay. Definitely a lot of work, a lot of physical work. I'm gonna be very tired tonight. I'm a little concerned I may be running out of gravel. Hopefully I can at least get this done before I run out of gravel. So, keep going. While one batch is mixing, I would load up the buckets to prepare for the next batch. The footings inside the slab used up more concrete than I was expecting. It took a few batches just to get those filled in. Probably would have been wise pouring a slab this size with footings to have the concrete delivered. Oh well, keep mixing. Since it was taking a while to mix everything, my first pour did start to harden slightly before I started spreading it. Also, I think I could have used a bit more water in my mix. Once I had one end of the slab almost full, I started leveling it using a 2x4. Working from one end to the other end, adding in more concrete when a batch was done mixing. When the slab was almost finished, I started on the two outside footings and pillars. While the concrete was mixing for that, I kept leveling out the slab. You can tell by the video it started to get dark, and I did have to run to the store to get some pre-mixed concrete to finish the footings. Sorry for not getting any video of that process, but it's pretty much the same thing. Mix, then pour, mix, then pour. Well, it's the following morning after I poured the slab and the footings, and I worked on it for probably close to 12 hours. I was actually out here last night with a light, just trying to get things finished. And part of that was smoothing it, which became kind of a challenge. I couldn't find my concrete float, so I ended up using a stucco float, and that did a pretty good job. And I worked on it probably 3 or 4 different times, and it kind of got better as the night went on. I wasn't that concerned about having the slab perfectly smooth, because it will be completely covered with the fireplace structure. So I was able to get the anchors in for the symptom ties. I was kind of going back and forth and putting them in. The footings are pretty easy to do because the marks are right there, and I was able to get that right in the center. This was a little more challenging to figure out exactly where the anchors had to go, but I decided to do it, and hopefully it works out. I actually ended up doing 15 loads of concrete in the mixer, and I did run out of gravel. I ended up running back and getting some pre-mixed stuff to get the footings actually finished. I just need to water the concrete 3 to 4 times a day so it will cure slowly and not crack. Now, one thing I know I forgot to do was tap the sides of the forms with a hammer. This would have helped eliminate any air pockets on the sides. Hopefully, it's not going to be an issue. All right, so the concrete has cured, and I'm going to get these forms taken off and see what it looks like on the sides. Let's go. that's about it. We got this slab done. Now it's ready to move on to the paving stone. Remember, if you like this, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Brew Builds if you want to see more DIY home videos like this one.